Aloha mai kako to all our family, friends, and lovers of Hawaiian history. Welcome to our presentation today of Kamehameha the Great. It's a honor and a privilege for me to be able to share some stories that I grew up with, also that I've been able to study, but at no means, my friends, do I claim to be an expert or anything like that. It's just things that I've grown up with and come to love. What you may not know, of course, I introduce you to my family. We just made 30 years of marital bliss, me and my wife, Drina Jo, Kaua Koku Ipo Hayapuni Namoko, formerly Kalani. Like we said, we were married over 30 years ago. We have 5 wonderful children and 2 wonderful grandchildren so far. I am a 7th generation great grandson of Kamehameha the Great. And I say that humbly. And those of you that know your Hawaiian genealogies are aware that Kamehameha the Great had over 31 wives. And of those 31 wives, over 35 children. So many people can claim lineage to not only him, but a lot of our great ali'is. But I always put it into this perspective that those accomplishments belong to them. And what kind of ancestor am I going to be when they talk about me when I'm not here anymore? Yes, those stories motivate me, they inspire me, but at the end of the day, they belong to my ancestors, not me. But I try to learn from the positive and also learn from the negative, because we can learn both ways. Now, moving along in our story this morning, it begins with a man by the name of King Alapa'i. Now, he was the li'inui, or king, for lack of a better term, on the island of Hawaii. Now, till this day, there's speculation on when exactly was Kamehameha born. Okay, we know when he died, it was in May of 1819. Some estimates claim that he appeared to be over 80 years old. So if you take that 80 years old and you do the math, that means or maybe around 1739. However, there's also legends that claim that there was a mysterious new star that appeared in the heavens. And so that if you do your checking on your celestial navigations, you will know that in 1758, Halley's Comet was seen over Hawaiian skies. So if that's the date that you wanted to put as Kamehameha's birth date, then that means he would have been 61 when he died. So he must have been looking like a very old 61 years old. Okay, so there's a 20-year gap. Till this day, we'll never know. A lot of the Hawaiian historians still cannot agree on a birth date for Kamehameha. Moving right along. What happens? This new star appears, and a lot of the kahuna, or the religious advisors, report that this omen indicates that very shortly a new chief would be born that would grow up to be a slayer of chiefs. This announcement was upsetting to Alapa'i, for he feared for his heirs and for the continuance of his family's rule over the island of Hawaii. Alapa'i's niece, Kikui Apu'iwa II, named after her auntie, was actually his brother's daughter, had just returned from Maui, where she had been visiting her relatives there. She had returned heavy with child, and the rumor that accompanied this pregnancy was that the child was fathered by Kahikili, son of Kekaulike, arch enemy of Alapa'i. This, of course, posed a problem for Alapa'i. He loved his niece, but feared that the child might be the prophesied slayer of chiefs. Hearing that Kikui Apu'iwa was at Kokuiki in the Kohala district, Alapa'i sent warriors to go and await the birth of the child with instructions to destroy the baby at birth. The night when the child was born was a stormy, dark, rainy, lightning, thunder. Sheets of rain poured on the warriors as they waited in front of the house for this little baby to be born. Unbeknownst to them, in the back of the holly was a Kikui Apu'iwa's uncle. His name was Naiole. And he was sent, or he knew about the birth, and he came to rescue the baby. But before we go on this slide, you see that Kikueapu'iwa, at the time she was married to her husband on the Big Island, his name was Keo'ua Kalani Kopua. He was the grandson of Keawe Kekahi Ali'i o Komoka, a great Kona chief. But also you see the illustration with Kahikili, also being the father. This led to the term in Hawaiian where you have a po'olua chief, or a chief with two fathers, which was generally accepted. Okay. Even that debate goes on today, my friends, who the true father of Kamehameha was, Kahikili or Keo'ua. Yeah, you have factions on both sides. Personally, I believe, through the different writings and different stories that I was told by my family and my grandfather then, that his true father was Kahikili. As mentioned, as soon as the baby was born, Naiole came through the back of the hale and took the baby, and he ran to safety, and was able to avoid the soldiers because they knew it was taking too long. By the time they broke in to see if the baby was born, Naiole was long gone, and lucky for him, because of the bad weather, they couldn't really track him because of the mud and different things, but he made it safely, and the baby was raised in seclusion. Now you have, again, two different factors that say he got the name Kamehameha, which means the lonely one, because he was raised in seclusion. And also from your Maui faction saying, no, he was named after his father's older brother, Kamehameha Nui Ailuao. The ruling chief that takes over after the death of alapa'i, he's getting old, he passes away. His son takes over, his name is Kavi'opala, but he doesn't last long, and he's killed in one of the early battles, and so the new ruling chief of the Big Island is a man by the name of Kalani'opu'u. Now he, like Kamehameha, is another po'olua chief, or a person with two fathers. One father being Kalani Nui Amama'o, again, a son of Keawe Kekahi Ali'i o Komoka, the great Kona chief, but also Pele'iuhulani, which is the great Oahu and Kauai chief. Now, Kalani'opu'u's name was originally Kale'opu'u in reference to his mom's, Kamaki Imoku's Oahu Tai. She's a very high-ranking Oahu chiefess. And he spent a lot of time in his youth on Oahu, so there's the connection again. To this day, debated who Kalani'opu'u's father was. Eventually, Kamehameha's, one of his fathers, Keo'ua, dies early, and Kalani'opu'u takes this lad, which is now back in the royal compound. Just before alapa'i dies, that decree he put out gets squashed. He doesn't worry about that anymore. So Kamehameha, as a maybe 5-6-year-old, is back in the royal compound, and after the death of alapa'i, Kalani'opu'u, the next ruling chief, kind of adopts Kamehameha and raises him, and he assigns a great warrior, teacher, confidant by the name of Kekohopio to train Kamehameha, not only in martial arts, but also in the different disciplines that someone of his stature should know: agriculture, aquaculture, astrology, all of these different things that the different sciences of the time. So Kamehameha was raised in this environment by Kekohopio. As previously mentioned, the wars between the Big Island and Maui continued even after the death of Kekolike, which was the great Maui chief, passed to his son Kahikili. And so the wars continued between the two islands. And Kamehameha grew up earning his battle stripes in the armies of Kalani'opu'u. Now there's a battle that happens on Maui near Kaupo on the south end, Hana side, where it's not looking too good for the Big Island invaders. In fact, what happens is the great warrior Kekohopio is tripped up in some potato vines, sweet potato vines, and he's being surrounded and circled by the Maui warriors, and they're about to kill him. When Kamehameha sees that from the distance, he goes and charges berserk and breaks through and rescues Kekohopio and saves him, they were able to escape to some awaiting canoes, and they were able to live to fight another day. One version of how Kamehameha gets his nickname of Paea is from this battle. Paea means hard-shell crab, and the Maui warriors were very impressed by his ferocity and bravery at this battle. Also during this time, now we just celebrated, well, not really celebrated, but we commemorated the death of Captain Cook. He died over 200 years ago on yesterday, Valentine's Day, but early in 1778, he makes first contact on the island of Kauai. He gets fresh waters and trades for some meat and some vegetables. He goes back to the Pacific Northwest, and then he returns to Hawaii Island in January of 1779. Now, unbeknownst to him, that's during the Makahiki Festival, and so the hospitality was granted to this visiting foreigner so much that he was given many beautiful gifts that ended up going back to England. And one of these gifts were one of many cloaks and helmets that was given to Captain Cook by King Kalaniʻōpuʻu. Now, Kalaniʻōpuʻu is getting older now, but these beautiful garments are one of a kind on the planet. Nowhere else in Polynesia you're going to see this fine work of feather work and such, and it's approximate that over 4 million feathers were used in this great cloak. And Hawaiians, they caught the bird, they plucked the feathers, and they let them go again. So of all the possessions you could have in old Hawaii, feathers were the most valuable because it was so hard to get. So hard to get. And it took years to acquire enough feathers to make different cloaks. So we're very, very thankful that we have a lot of these artifacts that are still in museums around the world, given away by the ali'i to different captains as they visited. Now, for your information, there's more artifacts outside of Hawaii than inside of Hawaii. So having said that, we were very, very thankful that, as I mentioned, Cook was killed. Yesterday was the other day was Valentine's Day. And, it started on somebody had taken one of his, rowboats, and he didn't like that. Now, you gotta remember, my friends, that Hawaiians afforded him many beautiful gifts and different luxuries, and gave him fruit and meat and pork and all of this stuff. And, again, when he came back, he left, but his mast broke in a storm right outside of Hawaii, so he had to turn around and come back. Now, when he did come back, he was not greeted with a big fanfare like before. In fact, he kind of, maybe some say, grew out his welcome. He took a lot of resources, and so I'm not trying to speculate here, but maybe the Hawaiian who took the rowboat thought it was something in exchange for all the kindness that he was shown. But anyway, he didn't like that. Cook didn't like that. He went ashore with a squad of Marines, and he tried to kidnap King Kalaniʻōpuʻu. And this led to his death because the Hawaiians and his bodyguards was not going to let him get kidnapped in exchange for whatever that rowboat that was stolen. And so he met his end on the beach at Kealakekua. And a lot of people say that he would have made it if he knew how to swim, but he didn't know how to swim, and so he was calling the men back to pick him up. But anyway, that was the end of Kalaniʻōpuʻu was saved, and Captain Cook joined his ancestors that day. But on that event, Kalaniʻōpuʻu, like I mentioned, was given many gifts, and one of them was a great cloak and helmet that was recently returned by our Maori brothers and sisters from New Zealand. This cloak ended up going back to England and then eventually in a museum in New Zealand. But on March 16, 2016, this cloak and helmet was able to return to Honolulu, and it was wonderful because they had a private ceremony. Was not open to the public yet, and so there was a private ceremony held at the museum where there was a lot of pomp and ceremony and protocol given. And our Maori contingent was here, and a lot of the Hawaiian groups, special groups, were also present. And as a descendant of Kalaniʻōpuʻu, me and my wife Drina were given a special place of honor to sit with our other Ka'u cousins, and that's the picture you see on the bottom, that were given a front row seat to witness this beautiful acceptance of this wonderful treasure. And it just so happened that day that the people that were scheduled to sit directly on the front row in front of us did not show up. And so I had painted a painting of Kalaniʻopuʻu that didn't find a home yet. And I placed it on that seat. So he really got a front row to all the festivities. And later on that day, at the conclusion of the ceremony, me and my wife decided to donate this painting to the Bishi Museum in honor of Kalaniʻopuʻu. So they have it in their care today. So that's the story of Captain Cook, Kalaniʻopuʻu, and the return of the cloak and helmet by our Maori brothers and sisters. Okay. Getting back to Kamehameha's age again, yeah. If Captain Cook came in 1778, 1779, that meant that Kamehameha, if he was born earlier, if he died at 80, that means he would have been 40 or 21. Now, if you look at Captain Cook's journals and the different things that were written, they say that they saw Kamehameha aboard, but he had a very young, fierce, ferocious face, and he was touching different things. He was very, very observant, very, very inquisitive that morning. And so you have another eyewitness written down by Captain Cook and some of his men, seeing Kamehameha in person, describing him with a young, fierce face. So that would tend one to lean toward a estimate that maybe he was born shortly after Halley's Comet. But anyway, the debate continues today.